Hey everyone, welcome to This Explainer. Today we're diving into something kind of amazing. We're going to look at a fascinating scientific bake-off that's aimed at solving one of our absolute biggest global food security challenges, and that is infertile arid soils. As our planet changes, figuring out how to turn dry, sandy, nutrient-poor dirt into lush, productive farmland is becoming absolutely critical. And while scientists might have just found the ultimate recipe to do exactly that. Now, to really get a handle on our secret ingredient in this agricultural recipe, we actually have to start at a blistering 600 degrees Celsius. That's the exact temperature used in a specialized furnace to create a potential miracle amendment for our soils. It's a pretty intense process that essentially cooks organic waste without a single drop of oxygen, locking in its carbon and completely transforming its structure.
So, Section 1, the Arid Soil Challenge. Let's talk about finding a soil savior.
To tackle these really brutal, dry conditions, like the tough soils they study over in the Sultanate of Oman, scientists are turning to something called biochar. Think of it as a super stable, carbon-rich booster shot for the dirt. Because it's produced by heating plant biomass without oxygen, a process known as pyrolysis, it becomes incredibly resistant to biological degradation. It improves the soil structure, bumps up nutrient availability, and gives beneficial microbes a really great place to live. But to really grasp its power, we need to know exactly how it's made for this specific study. And here's how they prep this stuff. It's actually pretty brilliant, transforming discarded organic material into a powerful agricultural tool. They didn't just grab any random organic waste. They specifically took discarded date palm leaves, which are super abundant from annual trimming on local farms. They chop them up, dry them out in an oven for 24 hours, and then blast them in that 600 degrees Celsius furnace for 2 whole hours. After it cools down, the material gets ground down into fine, consistent particles. The result? You get this highly porous, incredibly stable carbon sponge. Moving on to Section 2, the biochar alkalinity dilemma. Because yeah, there's a catch. Which brings us to a really big question, right? I mean, if this biochar acts like a water-holding, carbon-locking sponge, why hasn't it already turned every desert into a lush green oasis? Well, it comes entirely down to the harsh chemistry of the desert itself. You see, arid and semi-arid soils naturally have a very high pH. They are highly alkaline. For instance, the baseline soil used in this study started with a pH of 8.3. The kicker? Biochar itself is naturally highly alkaline too. So if you add an alkaline amendment to already alkaline dirt, you've got a recipe for disaster. It can literally lock up essential nutrients and make the environment even harsher for plant development. All right, Section 3, finding the perfect recipe. Let's fix this mix. To fix this crippling alkalinity issue, the researchers headed back into the lab, their scientific test kitchen, basically. They realized biochar alone just wouldn't cut it. They needed a multi-ingredient approach. So they brought in elemental sulfur to act as the acidifier. As sulfur oxidizes in the soil, it induces acidification, directly fighting off that excess alkalinity. But they didn't stop there. They also added rich composts, specifically traditional compost and vermicompost, which is compost created using earthworms. These are your biological activators, packing the mixture with diverse microbes and extra nutrients to really kickstart that sterile desert soil. Next up, Section 4, pre-treatment versus direct application. It's all about how you prep the mix. Now that we have our ultimate ingredients selected, the real bake-off begins, and how you combine them is absolutely crucial. The researchers tested 2 distinct preparation methods. Method 1, pre-treated biochar. Here they mix the biochar, sulfur, and compost together, moisten them up, and let them incubate for 50 solid days at 25 degrees Celsius before adding them to the soil. Method 2, direct co-amendment, where all these fresh ingredients are mixed together and dumped immediately, right into the dirt. So which method creates the healthiest soil? This brings us to Section 5, the microbial oasis. Let's unlock some soil life. The results here are just staggering, honestly. They completely redefine how we should treat desert soils. First, let's look at the chemistry. By using the direct co-amendment method, mixing fresh biochar, vermicompost, and elemental sulfur straight into the dirt, the pH plummeted from a really harsh 8.05 right down to a perfectly neutral 7.00. That is massive. The pre-treated method, it only managed to get it down to 7.25. Hitting that neutral 7.00 means vital plant nutrients are unlocked, and the soil environment is officially primed and ready for biological life. Direct mixing also created an absolute feast for the soil microbes. We measure this microbial diversity in ZOTAs, basically the number of different types of microbes that show up to the party. The numbers are wild. Direct co-amendment with compost yielded 980 unique types of microbes, but the pre-treated version, only 292. No way, right? The direct application literally tripled the microbial diversity compared to letting the mixture sit in a lab for 50 days. It turns out pre-treating the biochar actually resulted in fewer, more dominant bacterial species taking over instead of allowing a thriving, diverse community to bloom. When you map out the total and unique bacterial taxa, the direct co-amendment completely towers over the pre-treated method. By throwing the raw, fresh ingredients straight into the soil environment, entirely new ecological niches were fostered. It allowed a much wider variety of bacteria to set up camp, adapt to the sulfur and compost in real time, and thrive together in that alkaline soil. But wait, how active are these microbes? Well, we measure that by their respiration, literally how much carbon dioxide they breathe out per minute. And it's a fascinating trade-off. Direct mixing gets the microbes breathing and eating right away. When vermicompost and sulfur were mixed directly, they hit an impressive basal respiration rate of 6.60 del-G. They are actively improving the soil in real time. Pre-treating, on the other hand, showed a huge spike of 43.8 for substrate-induced respiration. What does that mean? It means pre-treating builds up a different kind of long-term biological potential, kind of like an army of microbes sleeping until a fresh food source, like glucose, arrives to wake them all up at once. So, let's wrap up this scientific bake-off. The clear, undisputed winning recipe for arid lands is mixing everything fresh directly into the dirt. The data shows absolute advantages for soil health when we just skip that 50-day pre-incubation. We take our date palm biochar, add elemental sulfur to effectively crush that limiting alkalinity, and immediately mix in compost or vermicompost to ignite an incredibly diverse microbial community. Which leaves us with a pretty massive thought. All around the globe, as our climate changes, arid lands are expanding. Good, fertile soil is becoming an incredibly precious commodity. By simply taking basic agricultural waste, turning it into biochar, and mastering this precise chemical and biological recipe, could this desert-born soil recipe be the key to our future food security? It might just be exactly how we feed the world tomorrow. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the incredible science right beneath your feet.